FAIRtax is coming, don't stand in the way. FAIRtax is coming across the USA. FAIRtax is coming, clean up this mess. We got to get rid of the IRS. Hey, hey! Hey, hey!
Hello and welcome to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
And we are the FAIRtax Guys. Reminding you again of our Facebook page, facebook.com/the FAIRtax Guys. Leave us a question or a comment about the fair tax. And we've got to do another Facebook Live. We've got to put that together. It's kind of been on summer hiatus for a while.
Yeah, it has.
But,
and with our travel schedules, I'm wondering just exactly when we're going to do it.
Yeah,
but we'll work on it.
Maybe back in the fall, September or so,
Yeah,
we can pull that off. And we do have an email address that we look at every day. If you've got a question or comment about the fair tax, you can get us at thefairtaxguys@gmail.com. And if you like, we'll even talk about you here on the radio.
We get some good ideas from people, too. We get good suggestions. Contact this guy, see what he thinks about it and so forth. Hey, did you see this article about tax reform and so forth? We get some great input from some of you folks, so please keep it up. And don't let FAIRtax Power Radio be a secret. Let everybody know. It's important to get everybody on board with the fair tax because that's the only way Congress is going to get into it. In the last episode, we talked about how Congress loves the tax code because they like to manipulate life in America the way they see it. All right? We need to make sure that Congress understands that. Thank you very much, Mr. and Mrs. Congressman, but we are very capable of running our own lives without you messing with the tax code. Get rid of the tax code. Get rid of the IRS. Let's go with the fair tax. Return the power to the people. Restore our lost freedoms that we've talked about many times.
Yeah, let's go back to just simply funding the government with a tax code.
Yeah.
And leaving all this other ancillary stuff that doesn't belong in tax policy. Get rid of that. And again, the fair tax is the only way that's going to happen because you hear a lot about a flat tax. A flat tax is still an income tax. A flat tax can still have exemptions and loopholes and deductions and stuff like that. A flat tax will still require the IRS to administer and enforce it. A flat tax will not stay flat. It will devolve back into the mutt mess that we've got right now. The flat tax is not the answer. The fair tax is.
Not at all. We started out with a flat tax in 1913. And then President Reagan was able to flatten the tax code again in 1986, and it is almost 3 times larger now than it was in 1986, 31 years. All right, so that tells you what happens to a flat tax. Like Bob says, it never stays flat. Congress just cannot help themselves. So we got to take this away from Congress. All right, they've been playing with this tool for too long a time. They've destroyed it. They've messed it up. We got to take it away from them. Again, and only the people can do that.
Yes. At last check, we again are watching Congress.gov and keeping track of how many proposals to change the tax code have been submitted to this Congress. It's over 700 now, close to 725. 723 is the exact number as of the date we're recording this. And that's just proposals that have been made since January. Congress has been in session about half a year, and we've got about twice as many proposals as there are days in the year. So we're getting way on up there.
And can you imagine that? Not even 7 months of this Congress and way over 700 proposals to change the tax code. What's it going to be like? And heaven only knows which one of these they're actually going to pass and make our tax code much more complicated than it already is.
Okay. Well, Ron, let's kind of take this program in another direction if we can, because we've been beating on the IRS here on FAIRtax Power Radio, and they deserve every bit of it, and talking about what's wrong with the tax code, what's wrong with the income tax. Let's go on this episode, what's right with the fair tax. Because, a lot of people, we can tell horror stories about the IRS all day long, but the truth of the matter is that there are only maybe a couple of thousand people that are abused by the IRS every year. A couple of thousand out of, close to 200 million taxpayers. That's a very small percentage of people who are actually affected by the abuses that we're talking about here on FTPR. And a lot of times it's just human nature. If it doesn't affect me, I don't really care. If it happens to the other guy, that's his problem, not mine. So we need to give people a reason to support the fair tax, what the fair tax does for you. And right at the top of the list, how many of you like having the IRS withholding money from your paycheck, from your retirement distribution, or if you're a lottery winner, they'll take a big chunk of that. So anything like that. How many of you actually like having a gross pay, which is what you earn, and a net pay, which is what the government allows you to take home? And there's a pretty big difference between them, because the government has this insidious thing called withholding, where they take their share of your money before you even get to see it, which means that the government has set itself up as your highest spending priority, bar none. You're expected to feed the government before you feed your family. And I don't know too many people of any political stripe or persuasion that thinks that's a good idea.
No, and I've been at a number of events where we meet the public. We had one on the 4th of July up in Orange Park, Florida, which is near Jacksonville. And my wife and I have attended, and Bob has too, a lot of different events where we meet the public. And when you talk to young families, like mom and dad and a couple of kids, they're walking by, and you mention the fair tax, sometimes they don't even know what you're talking about. Sometimes they do. But with those folks, when you mention withholding, how would you like to get your entire paycheck and be able to provide for your family before Uncle Sam gets any of it? And their ears really perk up. Those young families really adhere. Yeah, they're really interested in that aspect of the fair tax, because that's what the fair tax does. All right, eliminates withholding. There's no income tax at all. And they're only paying taxes when they go out and buy stuff, and they get the prebate to help them with that, too.
Yes, it eliminates the Internal Revenue Service because it eliminates the income tax. And if there's no income tax, again, there's no IRS, there's no withholding to support it. You get the full gross amount of your paycheck. And you mentioned a second ago this prebate, which is what makes the fair tax fair. And you not only get to keep your whole paycheck, you get a tax refund, which is what the prebate actually is. It's a tax refund every month that you get, refunding back to you money that was collected from you that you don't owe. Because under the fair tax, philosophically it says, your family comes first. Supplying your family's basic needs is a higher priority than feeding the government. And if we're going to collect this fair tax from you on every purchase, it is inevitable, or every retail purchase of new goods or services. Let's clarify that. But if you're going to be paying the fair tax every time you buy something, you will inevitably be paying tax you don't owe, because you don't owe any fair tax until your spending rises above the poverty level. And you sure as heck don't want to try to keep track of how much everybody spends. So just charge everybody the tax from $1, but refund back to you the tax that's collected from you that you don't owe. And that's what the prebate's all about. It's not an entitlement. It's the tax refund. You're getting back your own money. So you get to keep all of your paycheck, plus you get this rebate, which for a family of four is going to be close to...
It's $623 according to the 2017 figures we get from Health and Human Services. Yep.
Yeah. Now, I was talking to we had lunch over at the Mojo's the other day, and we ran into a friend of mine. This friend of mine, they've got 4 kids.
Oh boy,
6-person household, 2 adults and 4 kids now. 6 persons. Their prebate would be over $900 a month.
Well, yeah, because that's what's required to support a family of 6. So nobody is, yes, we will charge the fair tax on all new goods and all services, but at the same time, we don't want people paying the fair tax on the basic necessities of life. So the simplest way to make sure that happens is to rebate it back to them. We know what the size of their family is. We know by Health and Human Services what is required financially to support a family of 2, 4, 6, 7, whatever it is. Health and Human Services has those figures. And so we just figure, okay, 23% of that figure, or what is required to support that family of 4, divide it by 12 and send it to them every month. So you get your tax refund automatically at the beginning of the month, instead of currently with the income tax system, if you have a tax refund coming, you have to wait till the end of the year, get all your figures from your employers and interest and all that stuff, and then file to the IRS and hope they get back to you in a timely fashion, get your refund once a year.
Yep.
So... Yeah.
And all you have to do is tell the socials. This will be administered by the Social Security Administration, not the IRS or not anything else. All you have to do to qualify for your prebate is to have, legal citizens in your household. It's not dependent upon how much you make. You don't have to prove anything other than these are the people in my household. And your prebate is based on your household size, not your income, not how much you spend, not anything like that. So everybody gets the same prebate, or everybody that comes from the same household size gets the same prebate. And it's just a remarkably simple way. And, of course, that is the one thing that makes the fair tax fair.
Oh.
The one knock you hear on consumption taxes or sales taxes, it hurts the poor.
Yeah.
Because if you take away, 23% of what a family who's just barely getting by makes, that's going to hurt them a whole lot more than it's going to take if you take 23% of what somebody like Donald Trump has.
Yeah.
He could afford to lose 23% of what he owns and still live quite sumptuously. And,
That's right.
A couple of folks barely getting by on minimum wage, they can't afford to lose any of that. But you charge the same rate, you give back to that low-income family literally everything that they pay just about. Because if they're going to spend right at the poverty level, then the prebate covers the fair tax they pay. Their out-of-pocket tax rate is close to zero. And so it completely untaxes the poor. And we mentioned this as well, that the fair tax gets rid of the most regressive taxes on the books that the working poor pay and hit hard. Those are the payroll taxes that support Social Security and Medicare.
Yes. Yeah, if let's say you have a family of four and they're just getting by. They're earning just enough to put food on the table, a roof over the head, and clothes on their back, all right? They have no extra money. They're not taking vacations everywhere. They're just barely getting by, all right? So the government says, well, okay, we're going to make sure that they end up not having to worry about the fair tax. We're going to rebate it back to them. Now, what if that family has a big old raise? Something goes well at work for either mom or dad or whatever, and they get a big raise and they start earning, let's say maybe they double their salary, Boy, now things are really good. Same prebate because they're only protected against the fair tax on the basic necessities of life, all right? If they earn more and they end up spending more, then of course they will, pay more. So the prebate is not an entitlement, as some people say. The prebate is protection for all of us against paying taxes on the basic necessities of life. No government is so important that you have to pay taxes on the basic necessities, what it costs to keep your family alive. So that prebate is extremely important.
Yeah, if you want to do some more research on this, FAIRtax.org has got all kinds of information about it. Of course, I would also suggest that you pick up, if you haven't done so, you pick up and read the books that Linder and Bortz have written. They explain it quite well.
So, the first one was 2005 by Bortz and Linder, the Fair Tax book. Interesting title. Okay. And then 3 years later, they wrote the Fair Tax book, Answering the Critics, in which they did exactly that. They answered some of the critics, who were trying to say the fair tax wouldn't work. The fair tax will work. It's got over $20 million worth of research behind it. There's no question about it. And we know it will work because it's working now in some of the states. We have 9 states that have a consumption tax, sales tax, and no income tax. And those states are doing very well, and they're doing much, much better than the 9 states that have the highest income tax. That tells you something. Of course a consumption tax is going to work.
And we
Puts
are
the people
fortunate,
in charge.
We're fortunate to live in one of those states that does not have a state income tax.
Yep.
And our neighbor to the north, Georgia, where the fair tax was actually born, is now thinking seriously about repealing their state income tax and joining the ranks of those states that don't have an income tax, because they see what the economy of Florida, what the economy of Texas, what the economy of Tennessee, other states like that don't have an income tax. Those guys are doing a lot better than the rest of the country.
Yeah,
and Georgia wants to join the group there. So
We
if
all
you're
have
listening in Georgia, help support that effort.
Absolutely. We all have a stake in that effort up there because, and Alabama's trying the same thing. Both of these states have an income tax, and they're working hard to get rid of the income tax and replace it with a sales tax and have a prebate too, a statewide prebate, which would make it a true fair tax state. So that's a great effort. With those successful efforts, we can show Congress, hey, yeah, this will work. You guys need to pay attention to this. All right, forget this income tax nonsense. All right, you've tried it for over 100 years. It's a miserable failure. It's about time you did something right.
Hey, man, I tell you what, and that's the way the Founding Fathers had this envisioned, that the various states would be kind of the laboratories for trying out different ideas. And when you can see what works, the state can try it. If it works, other states can emulate it. If it doesn't work, then other states won't do it. That's the way that the Founding Fathers envisioned the country. And I tell you what, the states that are going to go to this fair tax kind of thing are going to be leading the way and will show the nation that it's a good idea to have more money in your pocket. It's a good idea to have more control over your own tax rate, because you do. Again, I haven't mentioned this yet, but folks who are familiar with the fair tax know that the fair tax, a retail consumption tax that is imposed only on the retail purchase of new, keyword new, goods and services. If you go to the thrift store and you buy used items, no fair tax on that. If you buy a used car instead of a new car, no fair tax on that. If you buy a pre-existing house rather than building a new one, no fair tax on that. So that encourages people to buy used, reuse, recycle. And so the fair tax is actually a good environmental bill.
And go back to that family that's just struggling to get by, that's just making enough just to get by. So on top of the, no withholding and no payroll taxes, and they get a prebate, if they have to buy a car, their old beater car breaks down and is not worth fixing, and they have to buy another car, they're not required to buy a new car. They can go find a good used one, and they won't be subject to the fair tax. So that helps that family even more. The fair tax helps the struggling people better than any tax system ever. All right? The fair tax truly helps the people that need the most help. And people, and the Congress people who claim, I don't know if they're lying or they're just ignorant, the fair taxes, without studying it, it's going to hurt the poor. They're wrong. They're just absolutely wrong. The fair tax helped those people better than any other tax plan they could possibly come up with, while at the same time, the truly wealthy people who spend more, they will pay more. It's just that simple. So when we meet people at these events, young families that are just getting by, when you tell them that there's no withholding and there's no payroll tax, they get their full paycheck, they really like that. And then that's when they ask for more information. Now we get some, at the other end of the spectrum, you get some people our age, Bob, who are retired. And, life is simpler for them. They don't have kids living at home and so forth. And they might be, financially off better than they were when they were raising kids. But they have spent their whole life dealing with the IRS.
Yes, we have.
And they've heard so many bad stories about the IRS. And they're all over the internet. Yeah. So when we meet people our age or, people approaching retirement or in retirement, when you mention that the fair tax eliminates the income tax and the IRS, that gets their attention.
Yes. I'll tell you what, because another thing that helps everybody, how many of you, let me see a show of hands here, how many of you enjoy spending a couple hours or longer filling out a tax return every year? Do you enjoy that? We've talked about this before. You sit there and you try to figure out all your deductions and you go through hours and hours. And even with the TurboTax or something similar tax preparation software, it asks you all kinds of questions about your income and your expenditures and how much you gave to your church and how much your mortgage interest was, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you answer all those questions, and at the end of about 45 minutes to an hour, it says, guess what? The standard deduction is best for you.
Yeah, but the government still wants to know all that information. Yeah. And if you have, say, a savings account or you have investments somewhere, they want to know all about that too. Not only how much you had from your, got from your dividends, but how much is in there. Well, that's none of their darn business, is it?
No, it isn't. And how many of you enjoy paying your accountant or your tax attorney, especially if you're a small business owner? How many of you enjoy paying somebody else to know all your private information, because they have to have it to make your tax return, and then they charge for their time and effort to put your tax return out there? Why even mess with tax returns at all? Wouldn't it be nice if there was no such thing as a tax return? that you never had to keep records for that purpose, that you never had to pay somebody else to fill one out for you, that you never had to tell the government all the intimate details of your personal finances if there were no tax returns. How cool would that be? There are no tax returns with the FAIRtax.
Yep. So all that time that you're spending now on, one, keeping records all year long, and then filling out the tax return at the end of the year, all that time. I mean, you can still keep records of your finances if you choose to, because you want to find out, where your spending is and so forth. That's fine. But there's no requirement. Under the FAIRtax, there's no requirement that you do that. That's simply your own decision.
And that's your business. You can keep it on your computer.
Yeah, exactly.
Period.
Yeah. So,
it's
you
disgusting.
Can still do
you
that.
have to tell the government more about your finances than you're comfortable telling your own kids.
Yeah. Yeah. So for those of us that are, near retirement or we are retired, all right, eliminating all this busy work, this unnecessary busy work, and eliminating the IRS, that's really like nirvana for these folks.
Yeah. So even if you are never a victim of IRS abuse, and again, there are stories upon stories upon stories, but that's still a very small percentage of the population that pays taxes that get abused like that. As horrible as that is, we need that to go away. But even if you have no adverse dealings with the IRS, you still have to fill out a tax return. Yeah. You still have to spend hours to do that. You still have to pay somebody to do it for you. And it would just be a lot nicer if we didn't have that. So FAIRtax, no tax returns, no withholding. You get your full amount of your paycheck. And we didn't mention earlier that, of course, it does get rid of the payroll taxes for Social Security and Medicare. Don't let anybody fool you into thinking that it defunds those programs. It does not. It actually puts those programs on a firmer financial footing than they're on now, because right now, only people working for paychecks support those things.
Yep.
Under the FAIRtax, everybody who buys stuff over and above the poverty level for their household size will be supporting Social Security and Medicare as well.
Yep. So, and, a couple episodes ago, we talked about those renters, those figures from Pat Giannini. And we mentioned that one lady, that the single mom with 2 kids, and her income was low enough that she qualified for the Earned Income Tax Credit. Yeah, but in order to get that, she's got to file a tax return at the end of the year and submit it to the IRS, and then hope that that thing, that return, that money comes sometime soon. But that family, that lady with the 2 kids, she will get the monthly prebate like clockwork
every
at
month.
The beginning of every month. How good is that for a family like that that's just struggling to get by? So again, the FAIRtax really helps the working poor. It helps all the people at the bottom of the income levels. In fact, right now, these income levels, it's almost like a caste system. We're not going to be concerned with people's income. We shouldn't be, all right? We shouldn't be concerned with people's income. We should just, pay attention to our own business. But all that stuff goes away. The people at the bottom of the scale are protected. The people that are more comfortable, you don't have all that record keeping you have to do, filing in tax returns. Social Security, as Bob said, Social Security and Medicare is better protected and better, more stably funded under the FAIRtax than anything they have now. I mean, we've got these predictions of a certain year that Social Security is going to fail. Well, it won't under the FAIRtax, because every time somebody makes a purchase with the FAIRtax, every time somebody makes a purchase, part of the FAIRtax collected on that purchase will go to support Social Security and Medicare. Millions and millions of transactions every single day will support those programs. How good is that, huh?
That's very good. And we haven't hit on this either, and we're about out of time here. The FAIRtax is fair.
Yeah.
Treats everybody the same way. I don't get a deduction that you don't get. You don't get a deduction that I don't get, so you can't deduct your golf balls and clubs while I have to pay for my bowling balls. We've hit on that before. But it treats everyone the same, and it is mathematically impossible under the FAIRtax for someone who spends more to pay a lower tax rate than someone who spends less. Everyone pays their fair share.
That's right.
You hear politicians talking all the time about people aren't paying their fair share. Well, you wrote this tax code with all kinds of these loopholes and exemptions and deductions for your buddies that are giving you campaign cash. So, yeah, it's not fair because you made it not fair. So with the fair tax, everybody pays the same rate. You get the prebate back, so you don't have to, you're untaxing the poor, and you can't manipulate the system. It is fair. Everyone pays their fair share. It's mathematically impossible not to.
There's going to be a couple of groups that don't like the fair tax.
Accountants, tax lawyers, who's
Congress and the lobbyists.
Yeah, that's true too, right at the top of the list.
Congress and the lobbyists. I mean, we've had CPAs in our presentations. They hate the tax code. They really hate the tax code with a passion. And they would much rather help their clients wisely invest their money than dealing with the tax code because they really don't like the tax code in the IRS. Imagine those people that do taxes and help people with their taxes, they have to deal with this all the time, you know. So they believe it or not, those folks really like the idea of the fair tax. Yep.
Yeah. So I love the idea of bringing home my full paycheck. I love the idea that withholding goes away. I love the idea that payroll taxes go away. I love the idea that I get a prebate every month, a tax refund over and above what I money that was collected. I'm getting all tongue tied here. Money that was collected from me that I don't owe, I get back. There is nothing wrong with the fair tax. There's nothing bad about it. There really isn't.
No, it's good at every single level. I mean, it really levels out the playing field for everybody here.
All right, how do we make this happen?
Well, first thing is if you want to help out in your state, first go to the national website, FAIRtax.org, and you can find out where the organization is or who the organization is in your state and help them out. I mean, we have a state organization here in Florida, and most states have some kind of an organization. Also, while you're there on FAIRtax.org, see if you can help them out, too. That's the national organization. They send people, the president, up to Washington. He's been going up there for every month for about 2 years at his own expense. His own expense, folks. Oh, and by the way, all of the state organizations and the national organizations, no salaried employees. We are all volunteers, and we are doing our darndest to get this to happen. So we need your help. People, you need to help us out. Let everybody know, tell them about the Fair Tax, and tell them about FAIRtax Power Radio, because this is a great way to keep up to speed with what's going on. We have a free weekly podcast. Posts every Friday morning, but it's a podcast, so you can listen whenever you want. And we have a free app for your smartphone, iPhone or Android. So you can listen there. You can listen on your computer. You can listen whenever you want. In your car. I listen while I'm mowing the lawn.
Oh, do you?
Yeah. I always listen to, I like to listen to myself,
Oh, yeah.
So, anyways... So help us out at your state organization or the national organization, AFFT, the Americans for Fair Taxation, and their website is fairtax.org. And you can get involved and become more proactive at bigsolution.org. All right, those are the two main
name.
websites.
We've got big problems, and the fair tax is a big solution for big. Congress will think small if you let them get away with it.
Yeah.
We need a bold, innovative thing like the fair tax to get rid of all the problems that we've got in our tax code system, because we need to get rid of the whole tax code.
Now, I'll never forget what Rob Woodall, who's the primary sponsor of the Fair Tax in the House, he was here in Florida, came to a meeting of ours, and one of his comments was, leaders must be bold, all right? So our leaders in Congress have to be bold, and we have to drag them to that conclusion. So
if you live in a congressional district where your representative supports the fair tax, especially as a co-sponsor of the fair tax, write them, call them, email them, express your appreciation. If your representative or your senators do not support the fair tax, just write them and ask them, what is it about the IRS that you love so much?
Yeah, right. What's going on? Are you in love with the IRS? Nobody else is.
Mercy.
Anyways, help us out, folks. Let everybody know.
Hopefully we have educated and informed. As a guy I used to know said, we have dispensed our smart pills for the week. Raised your IQ about the fair tax, hopefully have inspired you to get involved with it. And again, we do appreciate your listening here to FAIRtax Power Radio, and we are just about out of time here. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
FAIRtax Guys reminding you America's big solution is the fair tax, and once you understand it,
you will demand it.
Fair Fair tax is coming, don't stand in the way. Fair tax is coming across the USA. Fair tax is coming, clean up this mess.